It's a lot of details. As a more of a layperson in this world of water rights and area of origin, I have a question, and you touch on it, but I'd like you to maybe elaborate on it a little more. So I think of the inhabitant that has purchased through the federal or state water projects in the North Valley, let's say, in an area of origin. But you point out that there's kind of a sequence here in terms of how priority is determined, where you can understand that a resident of in the area of origin will want to invoke some kind of priority based on that. But if you look at it from a legal standpoint, there really it appears to be a lower priority as going through the project. Weren't there any agreements made during the project's enactments that might touch on this issue beyond the general application of area origin?
Yeah, there certainly was. I mean, you talk about the issue, in the water course, it's kind of a, any given water course, like take the Sacramento River, it's kind of a commingled, part of the water is natural flow, part of it is stored water. And as to the natural flow, I don't think there's any dispute that the area of origin, inhabitants have their existing water rights would have priority, and if they filed for new water rights from the board, they would go, kind of to the head of the list. And when you're talking about stored water, you kind of, in Northern California, it's kind of a tiered system. And I mentioned this in the report that some of the water service contracts give great priority to the Northern California use, because there were various settlement agreements and exchange agreements that were entered into when the projects were developing their water rights, and there were protests by some of the senior water right people in the Sacramento watershed. So many of the people in Northern California have the benefit of water service contracts that have this priority built into them. The Tehama case, which I talk about in the report, is one that kind of is down in this third tier where people didn't have that priority. They just came into the system later, had kind of a general water service contract, and what the Tehama case said, the people that were in that third type of category kind of had to share deficiencies with all of the water service contractors of the projects, including ones that were south of the Delta.
Not a question, just a remark and a thank you. You certainly achieve your aim in terms of presenting this information in a very clear way. Thank you. I mean, the report is very concise and looked like it almost could have been written by an engineer. Highest compliments.
I was going to
Craig.
say, that must be the highest
Sam.
praise
Thank you.
possible. Someday somebody's going to say, that could have been written by a biologist.
Just wondering if you're aware of, or if you could let us know of any cases where these issues were not contested. On the slide where you talk about the right to purchase, are you aware of any situations where parties collaborated on the purchase of water?
I basically focused in on the court cases, but I'm sure there are probably situations where there were, through exchanges or whatever, that there was some cooperation and.
But citing this as an example, as the reason that those negotiations needed to occur.
I'm not aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is there going to be follow-up on the climate aspects of this? I think this is something that would be extremely interesting to, particularly to the Office of Planning and Research. They're kind of doing a lot of work on climate issues, as well as Matt Rodriguez, who chairs the CAT, the climate action teams from around the state, from all the state agencies. And I think this presentation probably could be made to those two groups, and because this is certainly bigger than the water boards, and it's certainly bigger than the Delta. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I'd be happy to check into that, and if they
Okay.
would like me to make appearances, I would do so, because I just kind of look, into the future and what might be happening to the natural flow regime, and how it might implicate the area of origin laws, whereas, people in the north may not have the ability to build a big storage project, but if there's a lot more natural flow just in the system at different times, there might be a way to people to file for water rights that they hadn't in the past, and the area of origin laws could conceivably assist them in that effort greatly.
Great, thank you.
Interesting. Thank you very much. We do have one speaker card. Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Philip Williams. I represent Westlands Water District and San Luis Delta Mendota Water Authority. Our two entities would like to raise two concerns about the Water Master's report. First, it is Ms. Dodick, as you pointed out, it's an excellent document, and it achieves the effective concision. Our concern is balancing and walking that very fine line between being a concise report and making sure that it doesn't sacrifice accuracy. We have two primary concerns. One, that we feel like it misstates the law regarding the water protection statute. And secondly, regarding some of the court cases that Mr. Wilson referenced you to, we feel like it might mischaracterize some of the statements in those court decisions.
All right. Do you want to illuminate us?
Yes, ma'am. I'd be happy to. On the Water Master's report on page 9, regarding the water protection statute, the report states that Water Code Section 11128 makes it clear that the Act applies to the federal government, when in fact, Water Code Section 11128, what it states is it specifically addresses two sections of the water protection statute, sections 11460 and 11463. The AG opinions that Mr. Wilson referenced in his report and referenced in oral comments speak directly to this point and do a very good job of thoroughly analyzing the application of those two sections through Section 1128 and their applicability to the federal government. We feel that again, while not sacrificing too much concision, focusing a little bit more on the analysis that those two AG opinions would provide the layperson a more thorough understanding of how those sections interact with state and federal law. And two, I can go into more detail if you'd like, but I can also move on to my
You're just pointing us to what else to look at.
Okay.
That's helpful.
And to our second point, to my second point, ma'am, on the, is that me or can I keep talking?
You can
Okay.
keep talking. I don't know why it's giving you a halfway warning. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
To some references in the report from the four cases that Mr. Wilson talked about. In the report on page, I don't have the page in front of me, it characterizes a statement under one of the cases by Justice Roby, State Water Resources Control Board cases, those consolidated cases. It mischaracterizes a statement as if it were a rule of law, when in fact, Justice Roby, who later in Tehama Canal, emphasized that statement was in fact dictum. The exact statement found in the court case says that the State Water Board cannot reduce an area of origin user's contractual allotment of water in order to supply water for use outside the area of origin, absent some other legal basis for doing so that trumps the statute. Again, the point being that Justice Roby highlighted in a later opinion that this statement was in fact dictum and was not central to the holding. The report, the way that phrase is worked into the language, we're concerned that the layperson may understand that as being a firm rule of law when in fact it isn't.
Can you cite I'm looking at the report, page 10? Is that where you are?
Yes, ma'am. To our second point about our concern about a mischaracterization. Again, these aren't major issues, but we're concerned about making sure that it is accurate, making sure we're not confusing the layperson. Secondly, in the El Dorado decision case, the report we feel makes the opposite mistake, where it calls a holding that is actually central to the ruling and mischaracterizes it as dictum. It's on page 11, and that's in the El Dorado court decision. And the statement is, after a brief discussion of the statement in the report states that after a brief discussion of the county of origin laws, the court concluded that they did not apply to the matter in dispute. And we feel like after a brief discussion, and some of the following language in that report makes it sound like that's dictum, when in fact the El Dorado Court was reversing an opinion on that exact point by the lower court. So it's not dictum, it's actual central to the holding of the report. In closing, Madam and members of the board, we recognize that the report is actually, it's a solid, good report, achieves its effective concision. We're concerned about walking that very fine line between maintaining a concise report and maintaining a report that's accurate. Pending your questions, that's all I have.
I would just suggest that if you could put your comments in writing, I plan on keeping this report because I think it's, it's good and we can use it at some point in the future possibly. So if you have anything that you could provide to us in writing, then I could go ahead and, for myself anyway, keep it as part of this to refer back to.
Yes,
Thank you.
happy to.
Great, thank you, that'd be helpful.
And I'll just provide this is Michael Loffer, Chief Counsel, a fine point on the comment that was made about the State Water Resources Control Board cases and whether or not the particular characterization of the area of origin statutes in that case was dictum or an actual holding. It wasn't that Justice Roby reversed himself on that. In fact, in the Tehama-Calusa Canal case, which is a federal case, the Ninth Circuit, looking at an amicus brief that had been filed by the State Water Resources Control Board in that matter, looked at more closely at the State Water Resources Control Board cases, and looking at the State Water Board's amicus, did take the opinion that that particular passage in the State Water Resources Control Board cases is dictum. It wasn't essential to the holding of the case. So it wasn't Justice Roby reversing himself. It was the Ninth Circuit looking at his opinion after the fact and determining that that one small aspect of it was dictum.
Meaning the argument lives to fight another day.
Probably not before the Ninth Circuit, since the Ninth Circuit held that, but it's still an open issue potentially before the Courts of Appeal in California.
No. Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
both. Thank you all. Okay, that was great. Appreciate it. All right, high-speed rail.
Good morning, Madam Chair and other board members. I'm Mark McLaughlin, the Director of Environmental Services for the High-Speed Rail Authority, and I've been talking with Annalisa about making a presentation to your board as we move through our permitting process for the project. Currently, our 401 application for our first construction package is imminent to be issued from the 401 department, and we really want to talk about this next process as we go through for our 402 MS4 process, the public process that will be coming before you. So we talked about getting together again to provide you some information on the project. Hopefully, if you have questions on the project, I don't think anybody from High Speed Rail has presented before to the board on the project, so want to make sure we can answer questions that you have as we go through the presentation if you'd like. We always try to make sure that we can answer your questions. Not everything you read is true, as I'm sure you're aware of on other issues that you have in the media. With that, so first thing I wanted to acknowledge the staff that we've been working with at the state board. Bill Oram on the 401 side, Cliff Harvey, and then previously we were working with Eric Bernston as the project manager. I know Eric has since left. Annalisa is now the project manager, and we work with Bill Harris, and then looking forward to work with Annalisa and Greg Gearhart as we move forward to this next process on our next permit. How's that? Better, there you go. Thank you. Let's see. Thank you. So why high-speed rail in California? I'll go through a kind of a larger overview and we'll get into some more details on the project. So California has always been an innovator in developing long-term transportation systems to meet the state's needs. However, most of the state's current transportation systems are in need of upgrades and not prepared to meet the demands in the state's growing population. First thing, if we want to talk about airport congestion, LA to San Francisco is the busiest short-haul market in the country in the United States. There's 5 million passengers every year, and 1 in 4 flights of those, that short-haul market is delayed an hour or more. On roadway congestion, 6 of the top 30 congested urban areas are in the United States are located in California. So pretty significant numbers for our transportation system. So over the past few years, the authority has outlined in the 2012 business plan developing the high-speed train system that will, among other things, reduce construction and operating costs that we've gone through the last couple of years to reduce our overall cost by $30 billion over our initial estimates, from about $98 billion to about $68 billion. We've worked really hard with stakeholders to minimize our community impacts and worked hard to provide the environmental benefits for the train, the reduction in cars on the road and planes in the air. The other major piece of the project is a spur economic development. We want to connect all major regions of California through an integrated transportation system, with the high-speed rail being the major artery of those systems. Again, fully integrating in our existing transportation network, we're very focused not just on the train, but how we can enable or empower other systems within cities or counties to hook into our system or integrate. So one of the things that the authorities really worked on closely is the statewide rail modernization plan that we developed by the authority with our stakeholders in California, with other transportation leaders. This envisions a high-speed rail system that will connect the major regions of the state together and also integrate with the existing systems like I had mentioned before. Once the Phase 1 blended portion of the project is completed in 2029, riders on the high-speed rail will be able to travel nonstop between San Francisco excuse me, and LA in under 3 hours, reaching speeds of over 200 miles an hour. There will be 14 stations located throughout the state for shorter trips and provide access to the Central Valley, which currently major systems do not reach. When riders arrive at their destinations, they'll be able to transition to existing local and regional systems. Includes Metrolink in Southern California, BART and Caltrain in the Bay Area, and Amtrak throughout the state. The Phase 2 extensions in Sacramento and San Diego are planned for the near future. However, the investments in those local systems are being planned currently. So the funding portion of the project, which is large and complicated with large different buckets of dollars and funding for the project. So to implement the statewide rail modernization plan, Senate Bill 1029 was signed into law by Governor Brown in 2012. This allocates $4.7 billion in Prop 1A funds and $3.3 billion in federal ARA funding. These funds, along with the other state and local matching funds, will be used to fund and leverage the following projects. The $2.6 billion in Prop 1A and $3.2 billion in ARA for the first segment of the iOS from Merced to Bakersfield. $819 million from Prop 1A for connectivity projects statewide. $600 million Prop 1A modernization of the Caltrain corridor, which is the electrification of that corridor. $500 million in Prop 1A to upgrade rail in Southern California, and $252 million Prop 1A ARA funding for design and planning of Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the system. So significant investments in Northern and Southern California to invigorate those connections for high-speed train. There you go. So the initial operating section of the project is based from the Central Valley to the San Fernando Valley. It's approximately 300 miles, and the first step towards the high-speed rail system. So I'll follow on these additional sections or subsections within that. So one of the biggest questions we get is why do we start in the Central Valley? And there are several reasons for that, and I'll add on to a couple here also. So this iOS system will serve as the backbone to the high-speed rail system connecting the major regions of the state throughout the Central Valley and that central artery of that backbone. The Central Valley, again, is one of the fastest growing regions in the state, and the population of major urban centers in the valley, including Merced, Fresno, Bakersfield, are all anticipated to add future residents in the future. The federal ARA funding was made available to the authority with the condition that the authority start work on the high-speed train in the Central Valley. We also recognize that it allows the project to move forward at a lower cost than other regions of the state at this time. In addition to that, the first 100 miles, once we get to the first 100 miles of the section, we have to test and commission the trains. So it allows a fairly flat surface, flat project, test track, so to speak, and that testing and commissioning will last approximately 2 years. All the federal testing we have to do, the commissioning, safety, to ensure that we can provide that ridership, work out the operation portions of the train. So that's one huge advantage of starting in the Central Valley, in addition to the economic development for jobs in that area, which has some of the highest unemployment in the country. So the first construction segment, which we're all very excited about right now, is getting the project started. This first segment will run, again, about 130 miles from Madera north of Bakersfield. The construction packages will have 1 through 4 civil construction packages. Package 5 is for railroad infrastructure, track, the catenary system, and the positive train control. The first cost for the first construction segment is approximately $6 billion and is fully funded through a mix of the state and the federal funding. The construction package 1, the contract was executed recently this August, and pre-construction is underway in the Madera area. One of the things in that the contractor selected for the project is Tudor, Perini, Zachary, and Parsons for this first construction segment or package, which we call CP1, which is approximately 30 miles north to Madera to Fresno, which is what our first 401 application will be. So a little bit more detail into the Merced to Fresno project section. It's approximately 65 miles, and our board approved the final alignment, or the preferred alternative, the hybrid, what we call, for that section was approved last May of 2012 and the notice of decision then, and the record of decision by the FRA was done last September. So with the ROD, we were environmentally cleared and paved the way for work to begin, which concurrently, post that period of time, we started our permit applications for the major resource agencies, the Corps, the EPA, your agency, CDFW, and all the other 8 permits that we need to begin construction. And one of the interesting things, if you look at the slide, so that box in the middle is what we call the Y box. There was no decisions made in that section to allow further planning for San Jose to Merced. That box right now, we're doing supplemental EIR, EIS to complete that box for those alternatives for those stakeholders, which would allow us, if funding is available, that we could move our way north to Merced, which would complete the northern section of the iOS in the revised business plan. So we currently look to approve that or complete that in late 2014, early 2015. Oops. So how do I go back? Let's see if I can go back. There we are. Thank you. So drilling down a little bit deeper, you can see construction package 1 is roughly that 29 miles, which goes from downtown Fresno, crosses a major waterway, the San Joaquin River, to Avenue 17 in Madera. Currently, Tudor Perini is waiting. They have a limited notice to proceed on this. Notice to proceed will hopefully happen this month, then to begin in earnest their design and any pre-construction activities that they need to do. So currently we're seeking our permits imminently for the contractor, and we hope to have those done very soon. Your agency, your board will receive our permittee responsible mitigation plan for the 401 for that issuance, which will enable the 404 to be issued by the Corps, and then we will wait our permits from CDFW. And again, to follow up on the contract bids, after a long time, multi-year process, the team submitted, 5 teams submitted design build bids for the CP1 area last January of 13. Through the first part of 2013, the bids were evaluated. Again, Tudor Perini, Zachary Parsons was identified as the best apparent value for this first construction package. We continued negotiations and executed the contract this last August, and with limited notice to proceed again, I'll add on to a couple more things that they're doing on the pre-construction work, finishing project design, acquiring properties, which the authority is in that right-of-way process currently. The design builders, moving teams, and their subcontractors into the area. They've leased a building, which the authority is in their offices also for close coordination. The authority also has a construction management group overseeing the contractor, but the authority is still, from an environmental perspective, we are the permittee and the applicant, so those permits still reside with us, and we've assured that agencies, including yours, that compliance is paramount to the project. Fresno Bakersfield section, which you may have is recently in the news and what you've probably heard most about recently. It's about 114 miles, providing access to residents, again, of Fresno, Tulare, Kings, and Kern County. The authority continues to work with stakeholders to refine the Fresno Bakersfield alignment with the ROD anticipated in 2014, hopefully spring. On an agency note, we have an integration 404B1 MOU with the Corps and the EPA for our checkpoint process, which is checkpoint A, purpose and need. B is our approve a range of alternatives to bring forth in the environmental document. Checkpoint C gets us to the preferred alternative or the LEDPA for the project. So we're currently in that heavy lifting phase for Fresno Bakersfield. And it's a very tough process, but we're doing all the heavy lifting up front, which ensures us to get to a permit, which is very important for construction. So we have close coordination. The state board has recently been involved in a lot of those conversations to ensure that we're all on the same page as we go forward in the preferred alternative. So construction package 2-3, which is the next construction package after what we call CP1. And the definition of CP1 is comprised of, to go backwards a little bit, CP1A and 1B is part of the Merced Fresno environmental approvals. 1C, which is just south of City of Fresno, is encompassed within the Fresno Bakersfield environmental documents. To make it a little bit more complicated for the project, that we seem to fall into that, but there's a reason for that. And package 2-3 is the next, which will go roughly south to Allensworth. This package is about roughly in the $2 billion range, and we expect to see strong bidder participation on this project. So currently, we are mapping out our procurement strategy for the project, which equals permitting strategy to allow 1C, as we have a deadline in July of next year, as a notice to proceed to get those approvals to the contractor. The RFQ is imminently ready to be released, which that RFQ will qualify contractors, and then we'll go into the request for proposal on successful contractors that make it through that process. So the next steps that we have in the overall project is really closing the gap between Northern California and Southern California, again, to link those two major metropolitan areas. Funding is a big conversation that will continue to go on. The authority's looking at private financing with private investors, federal grants and loans. Cap and trade revenue has been those conversations at the governor's office on how we would qualify for that. Other revenues, concessions. It's important to know that the authority, as far as the operation of the train and the train sets are being procured now for the period of time for them to be ready for the test track. And the authority is developing a partnership with Amtrak to leverage that procurement buying power for trains, not only for themselves, but for us. And there'll also be a concessionaire who will run and operate the train that will be hired as a private entity. So with that, I think I'd like to close, and if you have any questions, or I'll turn it over to Annalisa. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to be following up with a permitting strategy that staff has for permitting the high-speed rail project. I think I'm clicking the wrong. There we go. So to provide some background on traditional stormwater permitting of construction projects in California, a majority of construction projects are typically covered under a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES permit. The most popular, of course, being the statewide construction general permit, which was adopted in 2009. Some projects might be covered under a region-specific construction general permit. An example would be the Lahontan Regional Board, where they adopted a construction general permit for discharges within the Lake Tahoe Basin. And then in rare cases, will an individual NPDES permit be issued for a specific project. An example might be a WDR, or waste discharge requirements. In addition to obtaining coverage under the construction general permit, a project may need to obtain a Clean Water Act 401 certification for activities that are within a wetland, headwater, or riparian area. And the Clean Water Act 401 certification basically addresses the dredge and fill discharges within that area. Once the 401 is issued, and Mark had kind of alluded to that, the 401 will basically certify the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permit, and that's the Clean Water Act 404 permit, also for dredge and fill discharges. Okay, so there's a unique approach that we are taking for this high-speed rail project, and it is for management of stormwater after construction is complete, and that's post-construction. So as many of you know, the statewide construction general permit has post-construction requirements. We consider that the baseline in California. So basically it is matching your pre-project and your post-project volume, runoff volume, to the 85th percentile storm by implementing low-impact development BMPs, such as pavious pavement or tree planting or installing a cistern. So in earlier talks between EPA, the High-Speed Rail Authority, and the State Board, it was identified that this is an opportunity for the high-speed rail to do more than the baseline in California as far as post-construction. And so the approach that collectively we had come up with was very similar to the California Department of Transportation approach. And so Caltrans has a municipal separate storm sewer MS4 permit, so their municipal stormwater permit. And within that permit, they have specific post-construction requirements that applies to all of their facilities, so it's clear for them. This was an approach that we would like to take for the high-speed rail projects. However, because this is a new project, the adoption of a brand new municipal storm sewer permit would be an issue. And the reason why is because we're supportive of the uniqueness of the high-speed rail projects. However, they plan on breaking ground this year. So fall of 2013, I believe, was the most recent timeline. Okay, so this figure illustrates the approach that we would like to take for the high-speed rail project so that we don't affect their timeline. So if you look at the teal figures, basically those represent the 401 certifications that will be coming out from the State Water Board. The first being the Merced to Fresno section. And what we plan on doing is basically using that 401 as a vehicle for the post-construction requirements. So their contractors will, or the high-speed rail contractors will understand what post-construction requirements will apply to the authority, to all authority projects. Basically, these 401 certifications will act as these vehicles for post-construction until we can have a long-term vehicle in place. And the long-term vehicle is basically that larger arrow, which would be the municipal stormwater permit, of course. So moving on to the proposed permitting timeline, and that's basically for the municipal stormwater permit and the next couple the next couple of 401 certifications that will be coming out from the Water Board. Before moving on, there is one message that we had always kind of made clear with the authority, and it's been a great working relationship. The State Water Board staff, we're very committed to providing the authority with the permits that they need on time and if earlier if possible. So here's a map of California. And this month, we plan on issuing the first 401 certification for the Merced to Fresno. So that's the first section of the high-speed rail project. So once issued, of course, that leads to issuance of the 404, and then the authority will be able to break ground on their construction projects. After issuance, municipal staff will start working and developing a long-term vehicle for the post-construction requirements, so the municipal stormwater permit. And we have a a projected adoption date of fall 2014. However, that's very much dependent on resources, on the timeline for issuance, because it's an NPDES permit. It goes through public comment, review, sometimes more than one draft that might be released. And at the same time, after the first 401 is certified, 401 staff will begin working on issuance of the next section, and that's the section that Mark kind of walked you through, and that's the Fresno to Bakersfield section of the high-speed rail project. And then thereafter, what State Board staff will do is State Board staff will establish additional schedules for issuance of the 401 sections, of the 401 certifications for the remaining sections for the complete project.
Could I add one thing, Lisa? So the big advantage that we have, and we want to make sure, since the project delivery is design build on the project of this scale and size, and that there's a lot of advantages to design build schedule, cost, and we want to make sure, my goal is to make sure that we have this bigger MS4 permit in place to ensure that the design builder designs to it and adheres to the compliance of that, and we hold them accountable for our permit, and definitely on the performance of post-construction and the operation of the train to allow that to continue to move. Our footprint definitely is not Caltrans. It is a big project, but it's not a Caltrans footprint, so to speak. But we acknowledge the project is large in size, and working with your staff to make sure that we can be compliant with what's required for California. Thank you.
A couple of, I had mentioned this actually when I got a briefing on the project. Thank you so much for coming in. I read about it in the newspaper, but
Yes.
That's pretty much it. And so I think it's very helpful to get a picture, and it's the picture that I'm kind of turning my attention to Tom and to Michael. There is a lot going on in this area that we are engaged in, not just the high-speed rail and these 401 certs, but you'll be using clean energy to power the electric system, which also has has a water component. There's a lot of discussion about groundwater, and both in terms of agriculture, but also in terms of oil and gas utilization. And so I just want to make sure that we're looking at the whole picture so that everyone is, that we don't come up sort of 10 years from now and say, oh, we should have thought of that, or it does all fit together, because this is a region where the groundwater basin is large, and it does, there are a lot of people with straws in it. So it shouldn't affect the high-speed rail project, I wouldn't think, but I do think we need to have, as we talk about these things, particularly as we talk about this longer-term permit, MS4 permit, we need to have it in the context of all the other things that are going on to make sure that there really is water there and that it's going to be available for a project like this. And my final comment, and again, it's a kind of big picture, but this is clearly a priority. It's the governor's priority. It's our priority. We've got lots of priorities, and we're not going to drop this one. Absolutely not. But I do think the next time we have a planning session, we need to look at all the priorities that are out there and the staff that are covering those priorities to just kind of maybe prioritize our priorities. It's beginning to, I mean, you referenced that what we do with this will depend on staffing. Well, it's not just this, it's a lot of other things that are going on as well. And once we adopt programs, we actually then have to implement them, which is also a priority. And so I'm beginning to kind of get priority overload. So I just wanted to bring that up, and let's discuss it at some, maybe next year. But anyway, put that on the radar. Thank you.
Can I just jump in quickly on that point? Because that actually was exactly what was going through my mind in terms of a follow-up discussion with Mr. Howard and staff. Because if you look at some of the timelines that are being proposed, those timelines are very similar to the timelines for the Stormwater Strategic Work Plan and other things. So, yeah, I definitely second Fran's comment about priorities and having a discussion about resources, timing, and as I'm looking, poor Craig is there, and I look at Greg, and he's our lead on a variety of priorities, and so.
Yeah, look how happy he looks.
Yes, he does.
That's my goal, is to make
And
him happy.
I'm going to start beating up on him pretty soon in terms of the Stormwater Strategic Work Plan, and there's only so much beating up he can handle and nagging he can handle. So, yes, I concur, let's have that discussion sooner rather than later.
Thank you for the presentation, and it was very informative. And I appreciated you pointing out some things as far as similarity yet difference with Caltrans. And so I think I have three real quick things. I want to support Board Member Spivey Weber and Dodek's points about potential synergies, in terms of as we do strategic work planning on stormwater and the opportunities for recharge and other things, other multi-benefit approaches. It's great, when you're building a project or retrofitting some existing rail lines to have these opportunities to improve drainage and water function. So, and are you finding that some of the Caltrans, say, standard plans and things like that, or are you looking at other transportation-based, low-impact development guidelines to guide your post-construction design build work that you
I
mentioned?
think Caltrans would be the first place we look. The project has its own mission, is that we try to be in transportation corridors as much as possible, whether that be existing highways and or rail, whether it's a BNSF or UP. And I think there's opportunities to, especially with Caltrans, for instance, in Fresno, we're moving, I think it's about 3 miles of Highway 99 at about $200 million that we're paying them to do for us. And as we go in and out around of their system, if they're retrofitting and in those areas which we coincide with them, we have the opportunity to commingle or design with them to ensure that we're not precluding their treatment, that their requirements are, or if we can combine those. So I think there's opportunities for that. The existing rail lines are a little different. They have their own kind of priorities, I guess, especially the freights. And we want to respect that also, but we'll definitely be doing more than what they do, or just depends on how the grades will be done. If we're in cut and fill, what side are we on? Where's the flows? There's no way that we're going to not have flow from theirs, or we'll try and contain ours as best as possible to treat. So I think there's probably synergies there that we can take advantage of.
Yeah, I really appreciate you incorporating the water goals into the design mindset. I think that's exciting opportunity. And then quickly, I had some experience in a past life in multi-agency permitting processes, and there's opportunities and challenges. And
I kind of look like Greg right now.
and so at any rate, you mentioned it kind of in passing Department of Fish and Wildlife, but this is a real a key integration opportunity here, where we have so much in common. Have they been at the table, and are we working well with them? And staff can point
We've
any
done
examples.
I think we've done things a little bit different on, with the core and the Cliff. I think Cliff's been at the table. He has been. We did open conversations with them on CRAM. That open on how we came up with our ratios. In the core, we said, bring your black box on how you come up with your ratios, and we did it in a collaborative manner. Your board was part of that conversations, and the core went back with that. And
Wait, can you explain what that means in laypersons?
Well,
CRAM, black box, what,
CRAM is a
I have
rapid
no idea what
assessment.
you're talking
The
about.
other thing is that we don't have, and I'm not the super subject matter expert, but we don't have access to properties. We don't have Caltrans, or a Caltrans project where they study the project, they obtain all the right-of-way, they bid it, and then they go build it. We have on Merced Fresno maybe 30% access to properties, which makes it problematic in studying. So we're assuming very conservatively resources that are on the ground. So we do as best we can to get access. We assume presence of many species right now to ensure that we take those into account, and we try to, again, get access. We have this desktop exercise. So we do a rapid assessment of what those values and functions of the wetlands are, so to speak, or seasonal wetlands or features or functions and values, again, of those habitats. Then we go into the core and we talk about ratios. If we're impacting 1 acre, is it 1.3 to 1 or that type of thing? So that CRAM allows you to value the function and value what you're impacting. If you have a low to poor quality wetland, our ratios should be commensurate with that and not getting to a super high quality. But we also, so that there's an even balance there versus just numbers in the air that people want to argue about. So there's a science base there that everybody feels comfortable with.
Yeah.
We also take the approach.
And Department of Fish and Wildlife is part of that group, right?
They're not necessarily part of that core conversation.
Uh-huh.
They have their own. We provided them recently, here's what we've come up with, the core and State Water Board on our ratios for functions and values of features. They get to take a look at it. Their jurisdiction, again, is much larger, as it has to do with riparian and other features that they take into account for wildlife.
Mhm.
So their impacts are a little larger, and we're trying to base that with that, and then they come up with their own ratios, which we yet to negotiate. So it's problematic. We think that we did get some nationwide permits actually today from the Corps for some geotech investigation, but we think that your 401 permit will be the first major permit issued for the project, and we're excited about that. And that's based upon the heavy collaboration we've had and openness with the meetings on how to put the permit together. And I think we want to continue that with Annalisa's team, which allows us to have quicker, expedient reviews and not handing a rock and bringing another rock back. That traditional way, we're not doing that. The other thing is we want to make sure that we're not, the way I call it, the developer approach. We don't have a developer hat on, where we're trying to do as little as possible for the least cost. We're trying to do what's fair, and we're trying to probably go above, beyond for the agencies to assure compliance and meet their mitigation needs, because the project is daunting in its size and schedule. So
The CRAM, I think, are for board members, information, is that the California Rapid Assessment Method for Wetland Evaluation, right? Wetland resources?
I think your board's been involved in that as you're working through your
Good.
riparian
So-
policy.
It's a standard statewide methodology.
There's more science to the conversation of ratios versus picking them out of the air. Hope I answered your question.
Yeah, so no, I mean, it's worth getting our arms around, the challenge and working together. We have so much in common with the other agencies. We should really be able to see the opportunities here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you have a?
Yeah, just thank you so much. It's great to hear something positive about the project, because there's so much negative that's in the press, unfortunately. And I've been working on this project for years in my previous life, so it's good to see that we're getting close to the permit, or one of the permits, one of the many permits. So just a couple of questions on, I see the listing of all the different funding sources, the ARA funds and Prop 1A. And what I didn't hear, you may have mentioned this, but the deadline for ARA and the need to be able to move expeditiously, not
Yep.
just for the transportation needs of the state, but also we either move forward or we lose those funds. So just want to get more information on that.
2017 is that benchmark that we have to hit, expend those dollars. to meet the requirements of the grant agreement.
Okay, and that is beginning construction?
That will take us all the way through those construction packages 2 through 3 and 4. Very daunting thing ahead of us to
Right.
get the thing built and to get it spent.
Right.
Roughly, the CP1 package is about $935 million. 2-3 is about $2 billion or so, in that range. And the packages are kind of set up for, that's a strong, I wouldn't call it, maybe, a ceiling might be a strong word for contractors to bond for. That's a big number, and that joint ventures can actually get bonding for. Anything above that's a little shaky for them in those in the markets for them for their performance bonds and all that. So that's kind of why those packages are set up that way strategically. And the funding is, again, it's a complicated, and I don't profess to be the expert on the financing mechanisms and/or how they get moved around, but those deadlines are pretty tough, and that's why Fresno Bakersfield, we are screaming to get a nod and a rod early or mid, I would say spring of next year for Fresno Bakersfield. We've been we've been working out many things with stakeholders in that section, especially as we go south, Bakersfield for one, and strong opposition in that southern Kings County area. But we're working through Wasco Shafter area also with those stakeholders on what they think is best for them for the train in their community.
So speaking of Kings County, are there any permit issues that you should highlight, or it's really an issue more of the local stakeholder concerns with
Right.
respect to the various alignments?
Yeah, and we respect them as local stakeholder also, equally as everyone else with local permits that the contractors will have to get, grading permits such if we're in that county area and or those cities. And we respect them. We've had lots of conversations with them. Our chair has had lots of conversations with Kings County, and we continue to work with them to try and meet their needs and demands. And I think a lot of it is previously, before the recent administration at the authority, it was very hard. You know, the authority hadn't had much staffing, and the project is as big that it is. With our new CEO, Jeff Morales, and regional directors, we have people that actually can go work with people, answer their questions directly, give them real answers. And that's changed, I think, the tide of how the project's being looked at definitely with stakeholders. I've been in many of those meetings, especially with the ag community. We've made a lot of strides there. People just want to know what's going to happen when, as best as they can, so they can prepare for the project or work with it.
I agree. Your chair has done an excellent job in turning things around.
Yep. Jeff Morales has done a great job too. He works really hard, and our regional directors are really key. We have people on the ground, boots on the ground now. You know, we have an office in Fresno, and I think we have a staff of 8 now, and that will grow.
The other question that I had was on subsidence. I know there's been some talk of subsidence affecting is it the Madera Fresno piece?
Yeah, a lot, and same conversation in Hanford, I believe. That same conversation, and that keeps being brought up as an issue, and it is, and we would look to find engineering solutions for that on that project on that issue where we encounter that in the valley. And that subsidence is happening for many reasons, I'm sure, from a crop perspective, water table, and many other things. So I think my answer is that's an engineering solution that we need to work out and make sure that we can enable for that. Plus, we have to deal with the Central Valley Flood Control Board. In this area too, we have to deal with them and making sure that we're not meeting their needs, not precluding facilities that they have. So it is a important topic that you are touching on.
And is it affecting the alignment to the west as well?
In Hanford, or are you talking
No,
San Jose Merced?
Right,
That's an issue
152 over.
Yeah. Yes, it is. That's in that same region.
Thank you.
I'm thinking we're the least of your worries, aren't we? Any other?
Well, we know and we respect the State Water Board on what you do and the reason why you're doing things. And so it's important for me. Environmental compliance is a very big focus of mine, not only on getting the permits, but ensuring their compliance and holding people accountable for that, including the contractor directly. And we want to ensure that we have that, again, the project design so that we can be in compliance when we have the operation of the train.
Great. Other questions? Comments? Thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you bringing it to us. All right. Our next item is scheduled to not come up until 11:30, so we will take a break until 11:30. And we will probably finish that in 30 minutes or less. And then we'll have a 1-hour lunch hour, just for your planning purposes.